Good morning. I would like to welcome everybody here today. My name is Anne-Marie Whelan from HP, and I'll be hosting this session where we will be discussing the democratizing learning through VR. Just some housekeeping before I introduce our speakers. If anyone in the audience wishes to ask a question, please use the Q&A tab below and we'll answer as many questions as we can at the end of our discussion. Our speakers here today, we have Nicola Herbison, who's the co-founder of 3D Innovations, and John A. Kelly, a non-executive director of 3D Innovations, and indeed an academic researcher. Nikki, I'll turn to you just to set the scene and give us some context around where did it all come from and why 3D Innovations?
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. I used to work in senior management in the education and local economic development sectors. And in 2010, one of my children was diagnosed with autism. Okay. I started to learn how technology could be used to support my child's learning and development and started to realize how important it was. I noticed that my child was particularly engaged with when he was using immersive 3D environments online. And one day I was observing my child to make sure that the use of the environment was safe, when suddenly my skills and experience as a leadership and management trainer and as an MVQ verifier and assessor, that experience and skills kicked in. And what I suddenly realized was that my child's use of an avatar in a 3D context was enabling my child to interact with others as equals. And it was removing some of the barriers that perhaps my child experienced in the classroom. And so it was unlocking a way of learning important skills for life and work, such as communication, teamwork, and of course, things like conflict resolution. So fast forward 10 years, and now we have our own 3D Innovations platform and services, which we've co-designed with and for autistic young people. And they're increasingly being used by a range of different organizations in the education, health, and in fact, other sectors too. And the feedback that we're getting is that 3D Innovation seems to enable sort of blended learning in a sort of slightly new way, which is not just beneficial to those that we originally designed the platform with and for, but actually is beneficial to all, perhaps because it was inclusive by design.
God, that's wonderful, Nikki. And can you, like some of the projects that you just mentioned there, is there some key standout success stories that you'd like to share?
Well, I think probably the thing we're most proud of, aside from the positive impact we've had with and for the autistic community, I think that it's our greatest success story is we were shortlisted by academics across the European Union for an award in recognizing the fact that we are an industry tech company leading a process of responsible research and innovation. And essentially what that's recognizing is not just that what we're doing is innovative and beneficial for society, but it's also inclusive in both the approach and the way the solution is rolled out.
Thanks so much, Nikki. And I suppose really now what people are probably waiting on, John, is around the advantages of 3D learning environments. If you can share what some of the key advantages are around that.
Of course, and thank you, Anne-Marie, and HP for the opportunity to tell our stories today in that respect. I guess the starting point here is it's important to say that today we're talking, and the headline says democratizing learning through VR, virtual reality, in that respect. But we take a broad definition of virtual reality. And as it says really as the name of the organization, 3D Innovations, our focus very much is on immersive 3D environments as such, which can be used with or without the access and use to a VR head-mounted device. I have one here that I use from time to time in some 3D environments, which many people will be familiar with. But and certainly can be used in one-to-one type of education and learning. But given today, and today, you know, less than 1% of students globally across the world have access to a VR head-mounted design. Clearly, as emerging technology and technology providers such as you and others such as Oculus and HTC bring out, you know, more and more head-mounted devices, clearly have more access. But our focus, and I think Nikki said it really, really well, is about learning through inclusivity. So what we mean by that is that our learning is inclusive, not exclusive in that respect. And as the title says, it's about the democratic openness, that where learners of all types, natures, and geographies can learn better in a 3D environment. So how is some, you know, what's the proof points of that, or you know, what's the affordances of 3D environments? Well, first of all, the enable and really push forward what is referred to as kinesthetic learning. And what kinesthetic learning is, and this is one of the forms or types of pedagogical learning, whether that's in primary, secondary, or further education. And kinesthetic learning is really about the ability for a hands-on approach, that approach of carrying out activities by doing as such, and in across different mediums, and that can be audio and visual. And clearly 3D environments have an audio perspective of it and have an extremely visual perspective of it. Equally, bringing it back to what organizations such as the European Commission, the World Economic Forum, are concerned and focused on as their own strategic kind of development goals, and even beyond that into other organizations looking at the future of learning translated into skills. 3D environments really foster and support creativity, collaboration, communications, and critical thinking, something which is increasingly coming to the surface as the baseline, foundation, the roots of not only better learning, but also learning to develop better skills. And one of the things coming out here is really around psychological well-being. Put simply, a happy learner is a productive learner, or a learner who has an increased sense of presence, social presence, personal presence, and a feeling of learning security. All these contribute to learning outcomes from a pedagogical point of view and from an experiential. And you'll probably would be familiar with things that we've seen more and more, gamification of learning. So, and that's fundamentally what 3D environments afford as such, through avatars, through personas. And you'll see some of this today in the presentation that we, and the demo that we will do, even around emojis, that the psychological well-being is essentially really fostered and driven and supported by 3D environments, and is what they do best.
That's wonderful. And I do think because of COVID has brought all this well-being such a hot topic like now. And I suppose, Nikki, from a practical example of how the 3D learning environments can really assist students, you know, that have some barriers or maybe the challenges that they're actually facing, if you could share that with guys.
Absolutely, happy to. And I think, you know, you mentioned COVID, and I think, you know, during COVID, we've all experienced what it's like to feel socially isolated, or see and understand why other people struggle when they're socially isolated. And of course, it affects us in lots of different ways, everything from learning to trying to work or whatever. Video apps help us enormously, of course, like these ones today. We can speak by voice, we can see each other. But the problem is we see each other separated in little boxes with limited options in terms of the type of interaction that John was talking about. Yes, you can break out into small groups, which is great. But again, there's a limited amount of control over those processes. So you tend to become an audience rather than an active participant. Video can also feel very intrusive. I mean, we're using backgrounds here today, and there are those sorts of options. But if you say, for example, don't particularly like being on video and you just find that too uncomfortable, and you turn your video off, suddenly you're invisible. And that doesn't somehow feel very democratic. 3D learning environments are just completely different because their starting point is a highly visual 3D shared environment. And you access that equally. All the teachers and the students, they each create their own digital character, an avatar to represent themselves, and then they see themselves together in that space. So the emphasis from a learning perspective is about a collective and a shared experience, which you can then enjoy one-to-one or in groups, depending which part of the environment you're in. So I think that's very important. I think it's also important to say that certainly in our 3D innovations environment, video is still an option. It is a valuable tool, but it's just one of many tools that you can use. And so therefore it can be used more purposefully. It can be used when you want to do a presentation where you're sort of practicing your facial expressions or your body language, and you want to have that, be able to practice that. Or you might be able to use it just to do a quick ID check of someone. But the point is, you've also got this avatar and this incredible range of tools to explore and interact and communicate with others in lots of different ways. So I think that co-presence is extremely important. The final point, I think, is that COVID has created so many different barriers to learning, and probably at a scale that most of us have not experienced before. 3D learning environments are really important because they help teachers and students to mitigate and minimize the impact of some of these restrictions. They can work collaboratively together in this shared space to create and modify the very environments that they'd like to have access to, but because of COVID, or perhaps because of cost or health and safety issues or geography, they currently can't get access to. Now, when they recreate and use those spaces for learning, I think it's important to say this is not about replacing physical world experiences, because those are really important. But it's just not necessarily, we can't have access to those physical experiences as much as we would always like, particularly at times of COVID. So this is about ensuring that barriers to accessing those opportunities and experience are reduced or removed as much as possible as part of a blended learning approach. So, this is exactly, 3D innovations is absolutely about democratizing learning through VR and helping to ensure that all teachers and students get fair opportunities to develop their skills and potential.
That's super. No, you've summed up very well there. And when I was reading up as well, Nikki, I came across this Autis Connect, and I was curious to know, tell us a little bit more about that, what it is.
It's an absolutely fantastic project. I'm just so proud of this project and the autistic team that led it at Autis. So it was funded by the Mayor of London, and Autis supported a group of autistic graduates and young people from across London to use a 3D learning environment to help them build the confidence and skills they needed to engage with people through a range of methods, both digitally and face-to-face, in order to learn about how local democracy works. So this was about very much using the virtual environment to reduce and remove barriers related to perhaps confidence, anxiety and skills, so that they could go out there and be these fantastic citizen researchers and then bring back what they learnt to the 3D environment. So through a blended learning approach, they were able to gather the knowledge they needed to learn about local democracy, and then they used that to create some amazing 3D learning resources about how local democracy works, not only building their own skills and confidence, but also creating a set of resources that, of course, can now be used by others. If you've got time, do have a Google and look at the Autis website, because there's a terrific video about the project, and the autistic team describe far better than I'm doing, what they've achieved. So yeah.
Of course. No, I was curious because it sounded very interesting, and so be it. But we'll definitely have a look at that. I think this is the exciting part I've been looking forward to. I think John and Nikki are going to do a demo, I believe, of what a 3D environment looks like from 3D Innovations. So
yes, yeah, absolutely. While Nikki's going to do the navigation, I'm going to do some voiceover talking points around it.
Super.
Whilst Nikki is kind of preparing that, what we wanted to really do today is we spent 10 minutes talking about some of the advantages and some of the affordances from an education and learning point of view, and beyond with even the workplace from that perspective. But what we wanted to show you today was an example of how it looks, and we're going to go through certain feature sets and of the 3D Innovations platform, a cloud-based platform which we have designed and is, as I said, has a number of unique, let's say, features taken from what all of Nikki has said, from collaboration with the communities and different learner types to actually get to this point. So the first thing to reference really is that this is actually a live environment. So this is actually happening in real time. You will have heard just Nikki now talking, and Nikki is now still within, as I said, this presentation and this call, but also within the environment as well. And additionally as well, we have a number of people. We have Tom and Louis in the background, which we'll bring in a little while now, in due course. But this is all happening in real time across multiple locations. And we've chosen an environment like an event today to actually just demonstrate some of the features. And one of the things that I really like to put out there straight away is that 3D environments like this are easy to use, easy to access, and easy to implement. So the key thing here is, like what we've been talking about, is that democratization, accessible inclusiveness. And from that perspective, think for the audience out there, whether you're a teacher, lecturer, educationalist, or anybody who's involved in some form of training, the application of how this might be used in this respect. So as I said, it's actually a real life environment that we're showing you today. Increasingly, to Nikki's point, this is going to be the form and the path to learning going forward. Recently, I read a interesting analyst report to say that 53% of college goers by 2023 will be completely learning online, 100% online in that respect. So it's an opportunity, and as I said, this year, I think 2020, as Nikki was discussing, has very much accelerated the understanding, the adoption, and the usage of 3D type of environments. So, as I said, once again, easy to set up, and not only that, in the setup can be fun and interesting for teachers and students and learners alike. So what Nikki has shown you here, as I said, she's shown you some of the just navigating around this space. This space could equally be a classroom, could be a training room, etc., and can be done on a one-to-one basis or a one-to-many basis. Nikki's been just zooming in and out to basically just show you the perspective. To add a little bit of fun, we've added some interesting objects like a blueberry muffin on one side and an apple on another. But equally, as I said, the elements in this, the artifacts in this can be simply added once the base environment has been created from that perspective. And Nikki, I think you've turned off your video now. And
yeah.
We wanted.
Can I ask, John? It's interesting to see that you're using a lot of emojis, and yes. Is there a reasoning behind that, probably from an understanding point of view, or?
Yes, I mean you would have seen we've seen Nikki just put up a circle. You know, that's our user interface really, which is symbol based. And coming back to my point about kinesthetic learning, and we would all be familiar with touch-based systems or haptic-based systems through Windows-based environments. Equally, this has been designed with that in mind. So on emojis, and I referred to that earlier on, emojis are a super way to use symbols rather than words to express an emotion or to actually answer a question. So within education, if I use a case example, it enables learners to give an instant response through any one of those emojis. And we have hundreds and hundreds of emojis built into this. So it's an instant way for the teacher or the facilitator within that training to get an instant and typically higher level of response than they would have. Outside of that, a very common use example could be in research. For example, in market research, if instead of, and we all talked about clearly earlier on about COVID-19, much of market research has now moved online from face-to-face, focus groups, etc. But the use of emojis in market research, particularly in focus groups or to understand people's emotion, perception, or response, is also a very good future use case of emojis from that perspective. And it's a question of simply adding and setting up those emojis that you want to use. And they can be used also in collaboration with other forms of content within the delivery of the learning as such. And we'll see a little bit of that from that perspective. You've seen just a short list of some of those emojis, and you can see how instant they are in terms of being able to elicit a response or to ask a question by a symbolic means rather than actually by a sentence or kind of heavier.
And actually, as a teacher or with these avatars, which are indeed students, for example, like you can actually be on the screen. I did see Nikki at one point on the screen there, and can she speak to the avatars like way we are speaking today, in this virtual environment, 3D environment?
Absolutely, and the two avatars in there are Louis and Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. I can put my video on back on again now because I'm not using video in the virtual world. But Louis and Tom can hear what we're saying, and I've been giving them using instant message chat to give them instructions of what I'd like them to do with some of the 3D pre-built models that they can just pull out and move around the space. So there's lots of assets in the space that just come as part of the 3D environment, and you can just configure them and modify the environment sort of as you want to. I think the other thing is we're trying to reduce the reliance just on verbal communication, because there's so many other ways that we communicate, and the emojis is sort of one side of things, but through our actions and body language, and why are we standing at this particular distance from each other? Because there are sort of social mores around interpersonal space and things. So it's a very interesting context in which to explore all these different concepts. obviously in the context of COVID as well, you know, reminding and getting people in the habit of doing things like hand washing. You can set up an environment so that before you can do anything else, you have to go to the sink to wash your hands. Now, you're not actually washing your hands, but as part of a learning experience, it's reminding you that that should be the first part of this particular process. And then, of course, you can practice it as much as you want.
Absolutely. It's coming down to that learning by doing. And that's essentially what it is. Learning by doing.
Sorry, I've just remembered that there's a face mask emoji as well, so I'm going to pop that on my avatar.
And that should be very apt.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah.
So on Nikki, I think I said
sorry.
Nikki, sorry.
No, go ahead, John. Sorry.
Nikki, you were going to actually get Louis and Tom, and hi Louis and Tom, to actually put some post-it notes, I believe, on the main board.
Yes, that's right. Well, I'll just turn my my drone cam on. So one of the things I love the most about this space, which is just one of the brilliant creations of our team, was the fact that you have your own personal drone that you can fly about to sort of look at what you want to look at in the space. And so Louis, Tom, could you pop another post-it note up on the board? So your laser pointer is what you use to point to things, but also to create and pop up post-it notes that you can just move around the environment. So again, you know, it's a fantastic tool for a teacher or for a student practicing and trying to facilitate digital collaboration, because, you know, people can just use the post-it notes to communicate as well as using voice and instant chat.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And with the post-it notes that have been put on the screen, if you kind of think of, you can then almost create a game around that. So you could put up 7 or 8 pieces of different content, and then you ask your audience, your students, your learners to select what content they'd like to discover more about today, whether that's a video content, whether it's a post-it note or a document, and then you can then zoom in on that piece of content. And what you're doing is you're learning what the learners are doing are more participatory, and it's much more peer-to-peer. And as I said, coming back to what Nikki was saying and what we were saying about more and more, there's more and more focus now really on blended learning, because of the very nature, and even beyond COVID, blended learning will be increasingly used, not just because it's having to be used, it's because it affords some great opportunities to utilize technologies such as this, which are actually delivering better learning outcomes for all.
I think what I love about this, like initially, Nikki and John, you mentioned that this was for a specific learner, but what I'm seeing here, this is really valuable to all learners, this particular environment. I could see benefits, or am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely, and I think that was one of the reasons that the European Union academics sort of recognized the value of our work. It was, you know, our methodology for approaching it was to co-design with the learners who were experiencing the greatest barrier to participating in education, or indeed other aspects of society such as employment. And what we learned through working with them was that a lot of those barriers were actually could be quite easily removed by using technology to create accessible and inclusive spaces like this. And by doing that, what we've ended up doing is designing a better way of working digitally for everyone. So, you know, there's so many more sort of tools and ways that you can use the space than are available through sort of standard video conferencing applications. And of course, it enables us to kind of create experiences as well as you know, that are really immersive and feel like the physical world, the real world. So you can use those to prepare for physical and real world experiences, or you can use them to anticipate what the future might like. And from a learning perspective, that is just a superpower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. No, that's amazing. And even for a child who's actually shy or whatever the case, believe it or not, I was quite shy when I was younger, and like I would have died if I had to, go on video as a child. But this, as an avatar, it would build up your confidence as well. And you see everybody on a level playing field. It just makes such a difference,
Yeah.
and confidence grows, as you say, over that.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Just one further point, if I may, in terms of, I mean, clearly some people may be very familiar with 3D learning and 3D environments such as Second Life and things like that. I think that was a question that came in. I mean, the 3D Innovations platform has specifically been designed over many years, much kind of research and development and participatory research with learners of all types, specifically to have a learning outcome. So it's really about the content and the artifacts, and it's really also about the usability, and the interface that Nikki has been showing you is really an interface that anybody can use with little or no tech, basically expertise or experience. And it is also something that experience over 3D without, as I said, the requirement to get the experience by using a VR headset.
Okay, I'm sure that was one of the burning questions. I'm just checking the Q&A here, and there's a number of questions, but one of the questions that keep coming up is around where to next around the 3D platform, or indeed 3D innovations, if John or Nikki wants to answer that.
I'm happy to answer that. So, I mean, first of all, 2020 has been very much for educationalists and all of us a kind of a stop and reset. And this year, as I said, for 3D innovations is really about accelerating what we've been doing over the last decade, and both within specific elements of education, broader education, and beyond. And beyond, as I said, to Nikki's point earlier on, we've already had a validation of the research and innovation that we've been doing at a European level, and we'll continue on with that. But also to actually enhance, and through the team here and with Louis and Tom, the elements such as the emojis, which you've seen, and other elements to really drive that participatory learning, both inside education and outside, and to really change the perception as well as opening up people's, let's say, use of 3D environments for practical work-life, education-life scenarios, rather than something that's quite specialized or specific they might do kind of on the weekend as such. So it's all really about joining up the dots, and it's joining up the dots with learners. It's joining up the dots with stakeholders such as European Commission, but also joining up the dots with technologists such as you to bring all of that together, because really together we can actually make this learning platform more democratic. And that's really, as I said, what I've enjoyed to see this year with the HP Future of Education. And I'm looking forward to seeing more from you guys on that, and how you're blending that learning approach into new forms, and all enabled by technology. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love what Tom is doing.
So cool.
Just totally cool, a drone flying here. And one of the things I just thought, just obviously from an education point of view, education institutions, whether ministries of education, I think this would be a very unique tool for them to, to have access to all learners, to ensure all learners are on the same level playing field. And presumably, Nikki or John, there's just there's something that you could do, that you could create like a sample of what you can deliver for an educational institution. Is that something that you would do, like as a demo, for example?
Over to Nikki. Yeah, I've been talking enough here. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've tried to make the process of playing with the environment as quick as easy as possible, because as John said right at the start, you know, if you feel safe, if you feel supported, and you're interested, that's a great place to start with learning. And the institution, teachers need to feel confident bringing this technology into their classroom. So we have a virtual discovery workshops where teachers or decision makers from the education sector or any other sector can come along, have a go with an avatar, talk to us, understand what the process is, how to go from where they are now to having this environment available to perhaps one class initially, or indeed for their whole organization. So there's a step-by-step process. It's very quick, and if an organization decides that they want to have their own campus, we can literally stand that up. We've got a fantastic trial package which we can stand up for an organization pretty much within within a few days. And the best way to learn with this stuff is to get in world with your learners and play. Obviously, you have to think about safety and safeguarding and those sorts of things, and we can help you with that. But with the video, it's very easy to check the identity of the person behind the avatar, and that we have all the sort of standard security measures as well to make sure it's a safe space.
Thank you so much. Listen, and the good news is this is obviously on demand, and you can actually, for anyone that wanted to actually re-listen to this session again, it's available on our HP Future of Education site, and you can link in with the relevant people, John or Nikki. Firstly, I'd like to thank you both. This was a fascinating discussion, and I just loved the demo in relation to the 3D environment. For me, it has been a huge learning curve. In fact, it's definitely it's all learners can definitely benefit from this 3D environment, not just specific learners. And I'd like to thank you both for sharing your story with us here today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you for the opportunity today. And thank you, Tom and Louis. I think they're having the most fun here. And Tom and Louis really made it happen today. So thanks to those guys. It's been a pleasure today.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Take care now. Bye now.
Bye.